So in the previous video, I talked about how if you are only getting advice from someone who has already achieved good results in learning a foreign language, at least someone who's already achieved the results that you're hoping to achieve, then you know that the method that you're working with is not universally ineffective because it worked at least for the person who you are taking advice from. But just because someone got good results at language learning, that doesn't mean that the method that they're talking about is going to be effective for you necessarily. And this is what I'm going to be talking about in this video. So basically, there's two main things that you need to watch out for: survivor bias and that the person might be misinterpreting their own results. So let me explain this. So survivor bias is the idea that just because something worked well for person A, that doesn't mean that the same thing is going to work well necessarily for person B and C. One example of this that I heard was that there are many millionaires who write books about how they became a millionaire, thinking that the reason they became a millionaire was simply because they had the right method and they knew what to do, without realizing that there are lots of other people who used the exact same method, but because they weren't lucky enough, they didn't get any results. And so the reality is that you have to, for example, have a good method and be lucky, or have a good method and have a certain propensity or a certain type of personality trait or something. So here with the survivor bias, we can see that just because something worked well for somebody else, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to work well for you. And then the other thing we have to watch out for is people misinterpreting how they actually got the results that they got. So basically, just because someone is very good at a language, that doesn't necessarily mean they understand exactly how they got that good. For example, in my model of how language acquisition works, getting input in the language, which is listening and reading the language, is the most important component of foreign language acquisition. And although outputting, which is speaking and writing, is important, it plays a kind of secondary role to input. But I hear lots of people, sometimes people even who are very skilled at a foreign language, saying that speaking is the most important, and it was doing lots of speaking practice that helped them get good. But from my perspective, like maybe if you actually go to that person and you ask them exactly what they were doing, they will say that, oh, well, every night when I was living in Japan, for example, I would go to the bar and just speak with Japanese people for many hours every night. And so from my perspective, it might be that when he was speaking to Japanese people, he was getting just as much input as he was outputting. He was listening just as much as he was speaking, probably even more. And it was really the listening that made him get good, not the speaking. But since he doesn't have the same language acquisition framework that I have, he kind of didn't view it in that way. And so he kind of misattributed the causes and effects to the results that he got. Because at the end of the day, we all do many things when we're trying to acquire a foreign language, and it's hard to tell exactly which of those things were the most important and which things were crucial and which things kind of we could have gone without. It's hard to tell that in retrospect. And so this is something you have to watch out for. Now, although I don't think that there are any surefire or easy solutions to any of these issues, some tips that I can give you is to, first of all, try to find multiple different people who have all achieved good results in language learning and try to find what all of their different methods have in common. Because like I said in the first video in this series, there's good reason to suspect that there might be certain universal components of language acquisition that all effective methods share, and that the differences between the different effective methods are more surface level. So if you can find a bunch of different methods and find the common denominator between all of them, there's a good chance that that common denominator is the most important and fundamental components that you want to make sure you have in your method, and that the places in which they differ are the more surface level differences that aren't as important. The other thing that you want to watch out for is people giving advice that actually differs from the method that they personally use to achieve results. Now, it's not necessarily the case that if someone suggests that you do something that differs from what they did precisely, that is a bad thing, because it could be that they are improving upon their method and trying to help you save time by not making the same mistakes that they made. But you have to be skeptical of this because oftentimes people give advice that differs quite greatly from what they actually did to get good results. For example, I remember the other day I was watching a video of this foreign language speaker of Japanese who was actually one of the best foreign language speakers of Japanese that I've ever seen. And she was making a video talking about how she got good at Japanese, and she explained that for the first 2 years, she was in America and she didn't have any opportunities to speak Japanese at all, and so she just listened and read Japanese all the time as much as she could, and she listened to the same clips over and over and over. Now, to me, this makes perfect sense because I think that input is the most important component in language acquisition. But then the advice that she went on to give at the end of that video was that the best way to learn a language is to make a Japanese boyfriend or girlfriend and speak as much as you can. And so this is a case where she didn't really have a good understanding of how she got good because she probably just never really thought about it that much. And therefore, she wasn't really instructing people to repeat the process that she did, even though she had such great results. So basically, just in general, try to really get people to talk about what they personally did and try to be skeptical of any time that the advice that they give differs from that, and make sure that they have a really justified argument for why the different way that they're suggesting is actually more effective. And the last piece of advice that I have is to try to find someone whose personal style and personality resonates with you, because although there are a lot of different styles out there, if you find someone who you just really like the way that they talk, or you just really seem to be on the same page and what they're saying just really resonates with you and seems to make a lot of sense with you, then it's probably more likely that the method that worked well for that person is going to work well for you as well.